A couple of weeks ago, I made a video about sewing on the go. I asked if you wanted me to make a video on English paper piecing, and the response was overwhelmingly yes. Today's guest is an amazing quilter specializing in English paper piecing. Emma Jones is the quilter behind the Vintage Sewing Box blog and YouTube channel. If you are looking for hand sewing projects, both are full of ideas. She's here with me today to talk about the joys of slow sewing. And there really is a vintage sewing box. So grab your sewing and a cup of tea, and here's my interview with Emma Jones. Thank you, Emma, for being here. I'm just so glad to have you here. So glad you said yes. Whereabouts in the UK are you coming from?
Thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk to you, Karen. It's a real pleasure. So I live in the northwest of England. I live in a county called Lancashire, and that's relatively close to Liverpool, which is probably the most famous city nearby to here because of the Beatles, of course. But it's really nice where I live. It's just a stone's throw from the countryside and also a short drive to the sea. So yeah, I've got the best of both worlds here.
Your name of your channel and your blog is Vintage Sewing Box. Is there a vintage sewing box?
I do have a few vintage sewing boxes, actually. In fact, I do collect sewing boxes, and I don't know how many I have, so that must say that I have quite a lot of them. But yeah, I'm fascinated with anything to do with sewing from the past, any vintage haberdashery items. I've got some needle cases. I love anything like that. So that's really where it came from. I wanted people to get the feeling that they were opening up a vintage sewing box when they go onto my website, and that's really where the name came from, really.
Do you have a sewing box you can show us?
Yes, I do, actually. I have this wooden sewing box which belonged to my great grandmother, so it's really old. I'm not
Wow, look at the work on the front.
Yeah, it's very detailed with the cut-out work here and on the lid as well, but it hasn't been well cared for over the years. It's probably it's easily over 100 years old, easily, because when I open it up inside, you'll see that the lining is missing from the top, and that is because my great grandmother used to put pins into the lining, and it just deteriorated, and eventually it was removed. I didn't remove it; it was already taken out when it was given to me, but apparently it was really full of pins when it was removed, and the inside, the bottom looks like this. So it is on my list of my to-do list to maybe try and get this restored, or to create a new lining for it, something like that. But it has a lot of sentimental value with it, belonging to my great grandmother, passed down to my grandmother, and then given to me. And there is a lock but no key, so maybe that will turn up in someone's drawer somewhere. I don't know.
That is absolutely lovely. I can see someone, having that beside their chair and, reaching to get the spools and the bobbins and the threads out of it.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to use it myself. And I think if it just was given a little bit of TLC, then maybe that I could continue to use it and breathe some new life into it. So it just needs a bit of care. But yeah, it was like I said, belonged to my great grandmother, and I don't know where it came from, but yeah, it's definitely been kept safe in the family for all these years. So.
Did you say you had another one?
It's a smaller one.
Oh, look at that!
Yeah, and I don't know how old this piece is. It's got a cushioned bottom.
I'm getting a serious case of FOMO here. I want to go out and find some vintage sewing boxes.
Yeah, I bet there are lots in antique shops and things like that. Yeah. You can really get addicted to collecting things like this, I think. But yeah. So this is actually missing a leg on the bottom. To me, this looks more maybe towards the 60s, maybe 50s. I don't know, because there's plastic feet on the bottom, so it's not as old as the other one. I don't know the story behind it.
It's just one you've picked up along the way.
It came with my grand's thing, so it came with that other box, but I know it's just not as old as that. So my gran passed away in 2019, and so I got given those things and some of her other sewing things as well. So her embroideries, I've got those, and yeah, lots of things that she had. I'm treasuring them now.
I inherited my grandmother's tools as well. I got all her knitting needles. I got a couple of projects that were half finished and was quite surprised she colored outside the lines. Here I thought she had been this prim, proper woman that followed all the directions, and was quite surprised to see that side of her. But they're all special.
Yeah, definitely. I made a video about my grand's things actually, and I got out one of her tablecloths that she started, and I attempted to carry on with it, but my stitches just didn't look anywhere near as good as hers. Her embroidery was just absolute perfection. So I didn't want to ruin it. So I stopped working on it, but maybe I'll continue with it one day. I don't know.
I find it fascinating that though we've come so many hundreds of years, how much the tools have not changed. We still use needles, we still use scissors, the thimble, everything. It's all the same.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I absolutely love about sewing, and a lot of my work is hand sewing, and I just love that simplicity. I love, like you say, you just need a needle, thread, some scissors, a thimble, really basic tools, but that's all you need to create something beautiful. I just love that.
So were there crafters or quilters in your family?
Not quilters, but definitely crafters. So my gran and my mum both were really big knitters. My gran did a lot of crochet, tiny crochet with cotton, like sewing cotton with the finest hook that you can imagine. She was phenomenal at doing that. Embroidery. So lots of those sort of crafts definitely have been in my life. That's what I've been brought up with. I was taught to do embroidery when I was about 5 years old. I can remember doing some kits that my mum gave me, and I can remember getting sewing kits for a birthday present. And it's just been a real part of my life, but not quilting. Quilting came later on in my sort of journey, my crafting journey, if you like. But yeah, my whole family are quite creative, whether it's drawing, painting, or musicians. Yeah, there's a bit of everything in our family, really.
So was sewing something that you did around the table together, or something that you were taught and then you went off and did on your own?
Taught and then went away and did it by ourselves, really. I think I had lots of supervision when I was a child, but as I grew older, I got interested in different crafts and started to teach myself things from books and from the internet. I was really interested in textiles as a teenager, and when I was looking at what options to take at school, I took art, but there was no textile option in that. So I decided to make my own work, but I don't know what the teacher thought of that, but I did. And it was quite advanced for the time, actually. We were taught to paint still life, and I did painting of some lilies, but my dad helped me to scan it into the computer and print it out onto like iron-on transfer paper. So this is in 1998, 99, so it was quite advanced. And I made cushions, and I also did lino prints inspired by William Morris. So a bit of that was learned from school, and other things I sort of taught myself. And it just progressed from there, really. And then when I sort of discovered blogs and things like that, when the internet sort of took off, I started following people who were garment sewers, and I got into that. But I quickly realised that I didn't really like the fitting side of making a garment. I found that really frustrating. And then I discovered somebody was making a quilt, and I thought, oh, that looks really interesting. There's no fitting involved in that. Nice and flat. And I got really interested in that. I love all the fabrics and how you can play around with colour. And I started to teach myself patchwork from books. And then when YouTube started, from watching YouTube videos, and that was it then. I was completely hooked on patchwork.
When did you discover English paper piecing?
Well, that was a little bit later on from that, actually. So I'd been to Festival of Quilts, and I saw a stand there which was actually selling something that was an alternative to paper in English paper piecing. So I'd heard of English paper piecing, but I'd thought, well, cutting out all those paper shapes and tacking them with thread, it's all too time consuming for me. But when I discovered at Festival of Quilts this product called Hexiform, which isn't paper, it's a fabric, and it has that, you can manipulate it, it's soft and nice to work with, and you leave it in, you don't take it out. I thought, oh, this could be a bit of a game changer for me. So I tried that, and then I was completely hooked on it. And what I really love about using the hexiform is that you can actually embroider into it. So when I really started to develop this passion for English paper piecing, I didn't want to leave embroidery behind. So I found a way of combining the two, really, and that's the direction my work's gone in. And yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Tell me a little bit about the piece of art on the wall behind you, the hexagons.
Yeah, when I started sharing my work online, this was a piece that got quite a lot of attention, and I was encouraged to enter it into a local art competition at a local art gallery. And this piece, I created it after my gran passed away, actually, in 2019. So it is a traditional grandmother's flower garden design, but I added some embroidery on the paths around the flower beds. And the embroidery, to me, it just signifies myself as a child wandering around her garden, because it was like that. She had paths, stone paths between flower beds. So I created this piece, and I was encouraged to enter it into a competition, and it was actually chosen to be displayed in the gallery, which just absolutely really blew my mind. I couldn't believe that it got chosen. So when I got invited to the evening presentation, we could go and view where all the artwork was being displayed around the gallery, and my piece was actually displayed in the cafe. And that's really significant for me, because my gran used to go to that cafe all the time. She'd go every week and have a latte in the cafe, and it just meant so much that my piece was displayed there. And if she could have seen that, I think she would have just been really proud. So yeah, it's a really special piece to me, that one. It has, yeah, a lot of meaning.
Very nice. I'm going to go to your channel and check that pattern out again. I know I saw it, but I want to go see it again now.
Called Mabel's Garden. I should have said that. That's what it's called, Mabel's Garden, because she was called Mabel.
Have you ever owned a sewing machine, or have you always just done the slow sewing?
No, I do have sewing machines. I actually have two sewing machines, and I actually recently bought one. I bought one at Christmas last year, and that's because I was interested in making some bigger quilts. So I have done machine piecing, and I was interested in having a go at machine quilting. So I bought a sewing machine that is more capable of doing the machine quilting than the one I had before. So I like all types of sewing, but I think my main passion and enthusiasm is for tiny patchwork and the hand piecing, because I find it so relaxing and something that you can take wherever you go. You can always have a project on the go. As I know you like your hexies too, don't you, Karen?
I find the hexies fascinating because I know about 10 people that do the same hexies that I do, but we all do different sizes. Mm-hmm. We all have a size that we like to play with. I've got a friend who does the 1/4 inch, another one that does 3/8. And you think there's such a small difference. Why don't you do one? But there's definitely a preference between one or the other. And I think I'm just under an inch mine that I like to do.
I think I actually like 1/2 inch pieces the best, which is what this piece is made from. But I like all hexies, but I do find that size really nice to work with. That's my sort of go-to size that I love. You can create it's not tiny like the 1/4 inch, but still got the effect of tiny pieces.
And you must finish projects fairly quickly when they're that size too.
Not me. I'm really slow. I'm really slow. I think a lot of what I'm doing now is embellishing the patchwork with quite dense embroidery. So for example, like these pieces here, well, that one's not that dense, but this one's got a lot of detail in it. So I was finding a way of making one slow craft even slower by adding this embellishment on, and I'm really making it up as I go along as well, which it's just part of my process is quite slow and methodical, and I do flip between projects as well and sort of come back to them. That's just the way that I work. So I do feel like I don't finish things as quickly as I should.
That's just me and my just get it done imposed on you. Slow sewing is slow sewing.
Yeah, for me, it really is about the process. I absolutely love the process of it and the taking my time to carefully consider things. Find it really relaxing. And it's something that really grounds me, and it helps me feel calm if I'm feeling stressed or anxious, just losing myself in that world of tiny pieces, tiny details. So I look for the fabrics that have intricate small scale prints. I really love those. I love using up scraps as well. It's such a great medium for doing that, you know, the tiny stitches, everything like that.
I see that you work a lot in Liberty fabrics. Is that because you're close to the source?
Oh, I wish I was close to the source. And years ago they did actually used to print Liberty fabric in a mill in Lancashire, but they don't do that anymore. I've always loved Liberty and visited the shop in London just a couple of times, but it was never something that I was able to afford to buy. And it's only in the last couple of years that I've actually bought some Liberty. I started out by buying just a jelly roll because you can get a lot out of those strips if you're using small pieces. So I started by buying that, and then you can buy scrap bags of Liberty, and then eventually I have started to buy some myself and developed a bit of a stash for definite. But what I sort of encourage people to do if they're using Liberty is to mix it with other fabrics, mix it with solids, and you can make it go quite far. So even though it is quite an expensive fabric, I feel like you can get a lot out of it and a lot out of a small piece.
You have a very distinct color palette. I see all those beautiful dusty pinks and dusty blues. Have you ever worked in darker colors?
No, I haven't. And I am planning to make a quilt for my son, which is a penguin quilt, so nothing to do with English paper piecing. But I realised I don't actually own any black sewing thread to sew the pieces together. So that really did tell me that I just don't work in any other colours at all. And perhaps I do need to branch out a little bit, because when I'm looking at other people's work, I love all colours. I can really love seeing bright colours and darker things. I love it all, but I do just gravitate to the pastel shades and those sort of dusty tones. That's really my thing.
Well, if you're looking for those soothing colors, if you're looking for relaxing and releasing stress and whatever, you're not going to find those with those dark colors.
No, that is true. That is true. So yeah, that must say something about the colors I pick. It's all about that sort of calming environment.
So quilts versus smaller projects. Are you still making quilts? Or I see so many beautiful small projects that you've got on your blog and your pattern list.
Yes, I am still making some quilts. I'm in the middle of 3 English paper pieced larger quilts. So I'm making an Alexandria quilt at the moment, which is a pattern by Tales of Cloth. And it starts out as a medallion in the middle and you work outwards with that. And I'm also in the middle of a Lucy Boston patchwork of the crosses quilt, which is a real classic quilt that a lot of people have made. I absolutely love that. I am drawn to traditional quilts, but I do feel like in my own work, I take a traditional pattern and maybe add a bit of a modern spin on it with the colours and things. But I do love that traditional layout of the Lucy Boston patchwork of the crosses. So yeah, I don't know when I'll finish those. They are definitely long-term projects, but it's nice to get them out every now and then.
I'm working on a 5-year EPP one called the New Hexagon Millefiore. And holy mackerel. I really didn't know the undertaking it would be when I started, but it's just, taking advantage of all that rotational symmetry and everything in it. But have you ever looked at some of those big kits on paper pieces like Mrs. Billingsley coverlet? I think that's what it's called. Thousands and thousands of pieces. done in a medallion style. So something in the middle, then, you know, changes to diamonds, and changes to squares, then changes to hexagons. And
no, I tend to go for quite simple designs, like the grandmother's flower garden design, which is another one I'm working on at the moment. I've added a bit of a twist by putting a rose shape in the middle. But I do tend to just go for simplicity. Again, that might be my need to keep things simple and calm, but I do really admire those complex designs with really intricate fussy cutting and the kaleidoscope effect that you can get from doing that. But I tend to just work in that real scrappy way where I just mix up all sorts of fabrics, and I don't do a lot of fussy cutting. I just really go with the flow and just choose things based on how I feel. I don't really plan projects very much. I just go with my gut. Even when it comes down to placement of fabrics and the colours, I just go with it. It's just my way of working. It's very instinctive.
And from the beginning, were you embroidering your hexes, or was that just something that evolved?
When I discovered the hexiform that you could use instead of paper, I just thought it would be nice to have a go at embroidering that, because I didn't want to stop embroidery and only do English paper piecing. I wanted to combine the two. And I just shared a little video of that on my Instagram page, and the response to that was just unbelievable. It just absolutely took me by surprise that people were really interested in it and hadn't really seen it before. And that just gave me the encouragement to just keep going and to keep sharing. And that's really where it came from, with me sharing online, and what the videos that I put out today is just come from just embroidering hexagons and people being interested in it. So it's just that combination of the two, really, English paper piecing and embroidery.
So out of all the steps in making your work, what would you say your favorite part of it is?
I think it is the sewing of the pieces together. I do quite like basting hexagons. I use glue to baste them and find that it's quite quick. But I do just love that repetitive nature of stitching the shapes together, just doing the simple whip stitch. And yeah, I just love that process. You can really get lost in it. It's very methodical and repetitive and calming. And I just find myself getting into that sort of zen state.
Have you ever tried the ladder stitch?
Yes, I have, and it just didn't work for me.
No, it didn't work for me either.
You can get gaps between your stitches a little bit more. I don't know, it just didn't seem secure enough. I didn't feel like that the shapes were together enough. And a lot of people say to me, oh, my stitches show and yours don't seem to show. But I think in real life, you can definitely see my stitches, and maybe it doesn't look like that on the internet, but I think the stitches showing on the front with the whip stitch just shows the effort and the time that's gone into the piece, and that we should be proud of our stitches and don't worry about hiding them, because you know that's your dedication to this craft. And I say this about embroidery as well, when people are not sure about their embroidery, be proud of your stitches. That's like your handwriting, it's your imprint on that piece. And you know, if we were writing a card to somebody, we wouldn't keep rubbing out our writing, would we? We would send it as it is. So be proud of your stitch. Don't keep on picking them. You know, that's you. That's a part of you into that piece, isn't it?
Are you a member of a guild?
No, I'm not actually. I don't know of any guild groups in my local area. It's something I looked at a long time ago, but there didn't seem to be anything in my local area. So maybe after COVID, when that's all over, hopefully I can have another look and see if there is something that I can be part of and a group that I can go to.
Do you label your quilts?
No, I don't. I really should do that because I love embroidery. But I should label them. And I think when I make some, I'm making one for my son, and I think that when that's done, I'll definitely put a label on for him so that he's got that to remember in the future.
What was your biggest, or one that you can remember, beginner mistake?
My first ever patchwork quilt, which was machine piece, just simple squares, but they're just not lined up properly at all. And I think that comes from poor cutting. And the cutting stage was something that and the preparation in the past was something that I just didn't want to do. I just wanted to get to the sewing part. But my mindset has completely changed on that now, and I actually really love all the stages and the amount of work that goes into a big piece. But yeah, I think in the past, not taking that time to accurately cut pieces when you're machine piecing is definitely a big mistake.
I don't think I ironed anything before I sewed it for the longest time.
Yeah.
And you wonder why things were out of shape. They were just all wrinkly.
Yeah, ironing is definitely important, isn't it? It's all those preparation steps do make a difference, don't they? But when you're keen and eager to get to your sewing part and to make it, it's easy to just sort of forget them, isn't it?
Do you have a favorite tool or a favorite thimble?
I've been on the search for a thimble, actually, because I have quite small hands. I've never found one that really fits properly. I've bought a lot of thimbles, but recently I've discovered one called a nimble thimble, which is a black leather thimble, and they did a small size that actually did fit me, and I've really been enjoying using that. I don't actually use it for whip stitching, but I do for applique, and yeah, I really love that thimble, and I bought a couple so that I would always have one if it got lost, or yeah, so that I do really love that. And I have some antique sort of vintage thimbles as well that I don't use, but they're nice to collect.
Well, you think of the workmanship that went into some of those old thimbles. I wonder whether they were just decorative or people actually use them.
I don't know. I think maybe some of the silver ones might have been used. I have one that's got enamel on it, and it's got roses on it. I don't think you could use that because it would get damaged. But yes, maybe some of the silver, quite solid ones, maybe.
So have the restrictions with COVID impacted your quilting at all?
Not really, no. Where I live, we don't actually have any fabric shops or quilting shops. So I haven't missed out on going to shops in that sense, because I would normally buy things online. So it hasn't really affected that at all, actually. I actually started my own little shop during COVID. In fact, I started selling my own patterns right before the pandemic. So I basically started a small business during COVID, which was, that was so it's impacted me in that way, if you like. It, my husband got furloughed. We were worried about his job, and then I thought, well, I'll try and see if I can make a small business out of what I'm sharing online, and I started a YouTube channel as well. So in that sense, it's been a positive thing for definite, but it hasn't impacted in a negative way, which I'm really lucky about. I know it's not the same for so many people. Not being able to get out and meet their groups and things like that. I didn't have that, so I haven't missed out on in that sense.
Is your son old enough that you can teach him how to quilt?
Well, I definitely taught him to sew. So we bought some kits, which were like hand puppets, and they had all the holes around the edge already punched into them. And it was a big plastic needle with wool, and I've taught him how to just sew a basic running stitch, and he can do it, and he can do it without help now as well. So, and he really does enjoy it. He really loves it. And when I was a primary school teacher, I absolutely loved teaching children to sew, and it really did have a calming effect on the class, even though it was a class of 30 children all trying to thread their needle. They would help each other, and I've definitely seen the benefits that it can have on children. I think it's really worthwhile, and it's really surprising to people how much the boys do get out of it. We can often think it's just for girls, but absolutely isn't. I really believe that it's great for boys too, and I've seen that boys really enjoying cross stitch and the things that we used to make at school. Yeah, so I think it's great for children.
Do you have a workshop or lecture that you give to guilds or people could attend?
Not yet, but I'm hoping that I'll be giving some workshops in the autumn winter time of this year.
If people want to contact you, how do they reach you?
Well, I have a website which is vintagesewingbox.co.uk. And on my site, I have a blog and I have lots of free patterns that I like to share with people. So that's definitely a great place to go. And there's a contact form on there if people want to send me a message or something like that. And there's also my YouTube channel, which people can leave me a comment there if they want to get in touch. That's Vintage Sewing Box, Emma Jones.
Thank you so much for being on the show today, Emma. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Karen. It's been a real pleasure to be here, and it's been lovely to meet you.
I hope you've enjoyed my interview with Emma Jones. Though she had a totally different color palette, different pace, different sewing style, it was wonderful to see how much we were alike. If you would like to check out some of her patterns, projects, and videos, I'll leave her social media links and contact info in the notes below. Coming up next on Karen's Quilt Circle is Laura Mata, business manager of Make Modern magazine, and we are going to be talking about the balance of business, quilting, and family. You don't want to miss it, so be sure to subscribe. I am coming up to the 1-year anniversary of Karen's Quilt Circle. I have had so many interesting people on the show. Be sure to have one playing in the background next time you're in your sewing room, and let one inspire you. Last week, I uploaded my video, Scrap Quilting, turning your crumbs into strips with adding machine tape. This video was highly requested, so if you missed it, I'm going to leave a link in the notes below. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell beside the subscribe button so that YouTube will notify you when I make new videos. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Just Get It Done Quilts, and of course my website, justgetitdonequilts.com. So take care, and I'll see you next time.